There are people in this world who give the way that widow did. I have come across that kind of giving once in my life, and I'll never forget it. I've told you before that I have a sponsored child in Bolivia. It's a great opportunity to do something good, and it doesn't cost very much. It's about $1 a day. I'm going to have a priest from the organization that allows that to happen, called Unbound, to come and speak to us sometime this year. Maybe you'd like to be part of it too. But I had a chance to do something that not many sponsors get to do. I got to meet my sponsored child. It was a fluke. It's because years ago, Bishop Hubbard sent me and some other seminarians to go to Bolivia to learn Spanish for ministry. The other seminarians who went with me are now priests serving in different parts of the diocese. And that's the country where my sponsored child lives. So I was able to arrange a chance to meet him for one day. Before we met, his social worker briefed me on his situation. She said, Filiberto, your sponsored child, is one of 6 children, and his parents are nomadic farmers. They live high in the Andes Mountains, and they just move around looking for good soil and water. They rarely are prosperous enough to be able to sell anything they grow. They mostly just eat it themselves. She said he has never seen electricity. He has no experience of any modern things at all. She said that the only source of power in their house is a can of kerosene that has a rag stuck in it. And they light that on fire every night for light. But she said, it's very dangerous, and I live in fear that I'm going to hear of the day they blew themselves up. So when the day arrived for him to come, we met in the city, a place he'd never been. He'd never been to a city before. The city of Cochabamba, where I was studying Spanish. And on that day, he had a ton of firsts. First time he ever had his picture taken. First time he ever crossed the street with cars going by. I took him to a restaurant, and he experienced that for the first time. One thing I regret is that I took him to an arcade, which was completely overwhelming. He had no frame of reference for that, and the pictures tell the story. That was not a good idea. At the end of the day, he said, Godfather, I have some things for you. And he got out this little bag of gifts. And one of them was a hat that his mother had knitted me that is typical of the people living in the Andean mountains. Didn't fit. He gave me a scarf that his mother made, and he held this little bag. And when the social worker saw what was in the little bag that he gave me, she burst into tears. And when he was out of earshot, she said to me, the grain that is in that bag that he just gave to you would feed his starving family for a week. She said, you have no idea how much love is in that bag. They are giving you their food just to show that they're so grateful for what you're doing for their son. And I was embarrassed because my giving to him $1 a day, how hard is that for most Americans? It was coming from my surplus. But his gift to me was their family's food for a week, and I didn't even need it. I had never experienced giving like that before. It was the kind of giving that the widow did in the first reading today. So it's hard for us to relate to that widow because she's from a different culture, and the way she gives, we're told in our culture, is actually kind of irresponsible, actually. You don't give the food that your kids need to someone else who doesn't really need it. We're the culture that always says, now, if there's a change in cabin pressure on this flight, make sure you put your oxygen mask on first before helping someone else. So I'm not sure what to do with the gospel that we've heard today. But I do recognize what's going on with the widow in the first reading, and I'll bet you do too. She is being asked to give what she can't and doesn't want to give. She's being asked during a famine to give the last bit of food that she has to feed herself and her son. When the stranger, who happens to be the prophet Elijah, comes up and asks for a glass of water, that's something she's willing to do because she's a good person and wants to be hospitable. But she can't share her food. It's the very little bit that she has left, and after that, she's going to die. But he asks for that. Have you ever been at the end of your rope and then something else happens? Have you ever given as much as you can give and then someone asks for a little bit more? I think most of us have been there in some way. And I spent this week talking with people about these readings, and all of them shared stories with me about this kind of situation in their own lives. I talked with a family that is living a very typical suburban American life. They're working hard, they have 3 kids, ages 7 to 13, and they are trying their best to hold it all together. Both have jobs that are very demanding. The dad's a lawyer, the mom is a teacher, and the kids are involved in all of those things that kids get involved in. The mom was saying when she heard these readings, she thought of how so often she feels like she's just not enough. She said, there's not enough of me. I can't work with all of my heart and soul all day and come home exhausted and then face all of the challenges with the kids and then fight with my husband. And then by the time I go through the nighttime ritual and feed everybody and get everybody into bed, then I do my work. And then by the time I go to lay down to go to sleep, I look at the clock and I realize there's not enough hours to get enough sleep. And I go off to bed feeling defeated. And then one of the kids wakes up with a stomach bug and is up all night. I don't want to do it. I don't know how I'm going to face that, but I need to. So somehow I get the strength to do it. I talked with a woman in her 70s who works for a parish. She was telling me about her daughter, who's my age, who has been battling a heroin addiction. She relapsed not that long ago, and this woman realized that she was going to need to adopt her grandson. 7-year-old little boy. She didn't know how she was going to do it. She's already raised her kids. They're in their 40s and 50s. And now she's starting over at 72. But she has to, so she's doing it. And somehow she's getting the strength she needs. I talked with a priest who at one time was stationed at a Catholic college. And one of his responsibilities was to live in the dorms with the students. One day, one of the most wonderful and popular students had a suicide attempt. Shocking. And so he went off to the hospital with a whole bunch of students to face that and to try to work through all the confusion and shock and sadness. He said he was completely depleted by the time he got home, and he just needed to fall into bed. But if you've ever gone to a Catholic college, you know that the biggest mass of the weekend is at 10 or 11 on Sunday night. People go downstairs in their pajamas for masses like that. And it was at 10:15 that he got a knock at his door from a student saying, "Father, the priest who was supposed to celebrate Mass tonight can't come. Can you come down and do Mass for the 500 people that are waiting there?" He had no homily. He was completely depleted. And he said, "I don't know how I'm going to do this." But he had to. So he was given the strength. And he did it. What about you? What does that make you think of in your life? Is there something in your marriage that is pushing you right to the brink? Do you have a sick loved one who you're caring for with all of your heart and soul, but you just don't have enough of you to go around? Is it something at work? Is it something with your kids? Is it that you've had several heartbreaks in a row and now you just got another one and you don't know how you're going to handle it? All of us are called to figure out how we're going to shoulder these burdens in life. And that first widow shows us because she said, "I can't do this for you." And then the prophet told her, I promise you, if you take a step in faith and give what you think you can't give, your flour will never go empty. Your oil will never go dry. You will have enough, but you have to take a step in faith and do this. And she did it. And she and her son never went hungry again. We may not be able to give the way that Filiberto and the widow in the gospel give. But as long as there are people out there like them, as long as there are people who give it all, how can we not give what is asked of us to give?